Welcome to the Scottish Rite Journal podcast, an audio excerpt of the Scottish Rite Journal. This week's article, Masons and the Holocaust, by Andrew Patrick, from the November-December 2018 issue of the Scottish Rite Journal. The persecutions carried out by the Third Reich against Jews and other groups deemed racially unworthy is widely known to educated people throughout the world. But what may be less well known is the fear and suspicion held against Freemasons by the Nazis. Now, many countries have, at various times, sought to suppress or outlaw Freemasonry, usually out of suspicion of them as a secret society. The Papal States had a condemnation of the Masons in the early 18th century, as did Ottoman Empire. In Europe during the 20th century, both fascist regimes such as Mussolini's Italy and communist regimes such as the Soviet Union outlawed Freemasonry. Francisco Franco's nationalist government in Spain was quite brutally repressive of Masons for decades. But Nazi Germany had a special distrust of them. From the earliest days of the National Socialist German Workers' Party, members considered Freemasons connected to and allied with Jews. In 1922, Alfred Rosenberg, who joined the Nazis before Hitler, published a book called The Crime of Freemasonry. Soon after, in the pages of Mein Kampf, Hitler himself declared Freemasonry a tool of the Jews, an excellent instrument with which to fight for his aims and put them across. The governing circles and the higher strata of the political and economic bourgeoisies are brought into his nets by the strings of Freemasonry and never need to suspect what is happening. Well, in another passage of his infamous book, Hitler wrote, "Ourselves or the Freemasons or the Church. There is room for one of the three and no more. And we are the strongest of the three and shall get rid of the other two." Nor was that all. The Nazi publication, Die Stimme, made a point of linking Freemasons to Jews in cartoons and articles. And the notorious Reinhard Heydrich, chief of the security police and SD, Sicherheitsdienst, and the security and intelligence wing of the SS, was known to refer to Freemasons along with Jews and the clergy as the most implacable enemies of the German race, and believed in the elimination of all forms of Masonry, as well as the Masonic infectious residue that remains in the unconscious of many. Well, such a linkage of the Freemasons with Jews was firmly believed by the Nazis and passed into their propaganda. A guide and instructional letter issued to party officials instructed them that the natural hostility of the peasant against the Jews and his hostility against the Freemason as a servant of the Jew must be worked up to a frenzy. Well, persecution of Masons in the Third Reich, given the enmity of Nazis toward Freemasonry during their climb to power, one would expect them to act swiftly against them once they had taken over Germany. Well, this they did. In the beginning of 1934, Nazi Party membership was banned for any Mason who did not leave his lodge prior to January 30, 1933. Not long after, Hermann Göring, then Minister of the Interior for Prussia, decreed voluntary dissolution of Masonic lodges, submitted to him for approval. Well, this process took a long time and was generally aimed at the more left-wing and socialist lodges. Göring was not the only one closing lodges. By the summer of 1934, Heydrich and Heinrich Himmler, and having finished their takeover of the Gestapo, began to forcibly close lodges, confiscating their assets, libraries, and archives. And in October of the same year, Reich Minister of the Interior, Wilhelm Frick, declared Masonic lodges hostile to the state and subject to asset confiscation. This process swiftly came to a head. In August of 1935, Frick ordered the closure of all remaining lodges and the confiscation of assets. Now, within 2 years of the Nazis coming to power, not a single legal Masonic lodge operated in Germany. Not only that, but the Defense Ministry banned the employment of those who were or had been Masons, either as soldiers or civilian employees. Now, two things resulted from the Nazis' swift victory. In the first place, offices were set up to ensure that the victory stayed in place. In September 1935, Heydrich created Section 111 of the SD to deal specifically with Freemasonry. The section operated under the assumption that Freemason remained powerful worldwide, especially in the control of the press. Investigating the supposed ability of Masons to subvert the Nazi Reich became their prime activity. Secondly, as time went on and the war approached, the eradication of legal Masonic activity in Germany meant the persecution of individuals who had been Masons relaxed. In April 1938, Hitler issued an amnesty for former Masons who had renounced their loyalty to Freemasonry. Now, this allowed Reich employment for those former Masons on a case-by-case basis. Some civil servants who had lost their jobs due to association with Masons were recalled when war began, and the 1934 Defense Ministry ban was lifted as well. Some former Masons found their way into the ranks of the SS. However, the old paranoia never quite lifted. When Field Marshal Friedrich Paulus surrendered the German Sixth Army to the Soviets at Stalingrad in 1943, there were some whispers denouncing him as a high-level Freemason. Well, in any case, none of these amnesties applied to non-German Freemasons. As the Nazis invaded Europe, Masonic lodges and organizations were subject to the same treatment as their German brethren had been. Lodges closed, assets and documents confiscated by the SD. These asset confiscations had another purpose beyond shutting down Masonic activity. These materials were used to create a series of anti-Masonic exhibitions. The first one opened in Germany in 1937, then in France in 1940, and in Brussels and Belgrade in 1941. These displays intended to demonstrate the secrets of Freemasonry was also an idea that predated the Third Reich. In 1927, General Erich Ludendorff published The Destruction of Freemasonry Through the Exposure of Its Secrets. Well, Ludendorff had been chief of the German Army General Staff during World War I, and although never officially a Nazi, he had participated in the Nazi beer hall putsch of 1923. In his book, Ludendorff claimed insider knowledge of rituals and beliefs of the Freemasons and advocated the spreading of such to the general public. That was in order to demonstrate how detrimental to the culture Masons were. Well, as with others, Ludendorff considered the Masons connected with Jews, referring them as artificial Jews. The exhibitions made use of confiscated records and objects and were supposed to show what Masonic lodges looked like on the inside. But in reality, the displays were distorted versions, often with Jewish symbols interspersed with Masonic ones. Skeletons and skulls also appeared to no purpose but to play on people's fears. Now, as the war progressed, German allies such as Vichy France also passed anti-Masonic measures. Freemasons were banned by edict in all of Nazi-occupied Europe. In September 1942, Alfred Rosenberg's deployment staff starts going through Masonic archives and libraries. That was in preparation for an intellectual war against worldwide Masonry. Especially in France, those who collaborated with the Vichy regime participated in anti-Masonic propaganda. Now, one such collaborator, the film producer and writer Jean Mamie, was actually an ex-Mason himself, who disassociated himself with Masonry in 1939. In 1943, Mamie, under the pseudonym Paul Ritchie, directed the anti-Masonic propaganda film in 1943, Occult Forces. Now, that tells the story of a French deputy who was initiated into Masonry to further his career, only to discover a sinister Jewish Masonic conspiracy that brought about the war. Mamie was executed for collaboration in 1949. Because Masonry had been removed from Germany before World War II started, German Masons were not generally sent to concentration camps merely for being Freemasons. German Masons who were sent to camps were usually sent for other reasons, such as being Jewish or some other category of being an official enemy. Outside of Germany, however, Masons could be arrested and sent away on no other pretext. Those Masons who were sent to camps were usually labeled as political prisoners, forced to wear a red triangle sewn onto their clothes, as opposed to the yellow star of Jews, to which they often added blue forget-me-nots to identify themselves to fellow Masons. By such means, some Masons managed to hold secret lodge meetings within such camps. One of the more famous examples of this was Liberte Charry Lodge, established in 1943 as the Estavagen concentration camp. This lodge was founded by primarily Belgian Masons and managed to meet for about a half-hour intervals during the day under simplified rituals. They initiated one member, Ferdinand Ira, before ceasing to operate at the beginning of 1944. But nevertheless, the lodge's history was reported to the Grand Orient of Belgium shortly after the war. A memorial to Liberte Charry Lodge was raised by German and Belgian Masons in 2004. There is no official number of how many Freemasons were killed by the Nazis. Chris Hodap's 2013 Freemasonry for Dummies gives an estimate of between 80,000 and 200,000. After the war, many Masonic archives which had been seized by the Nazis fell into the hands of the Allies. An especially large Masonic archive was found in Silesia by Soviet troops. As Masonry was also illegal in the USSR, Soviet policy was to ship such records to Moscow and hold them in secret archives. Many records captured by American forces are on display at the United States Holocaust Museum. Since the Cold War ended, many Masonic collections have been returned to Masonic organizations in their country of origin. However, many have not. Don't forget, the Scottish Rite Journal is available online at scottishrite.org and also available for free in your app store for your tablet or smartphone. Any citations or photographs for this article can be found in the corresponding print edition of the Scottish Rite Journal. The Scottish Rite Journal podcast is produced by the Supreme Council of the Scottish Rite, Southern Jurisdiction, Mother Supreme Council of the World. Editor-in-Chief, the illustrious S. Brent Morris, 33rd Degree. I'm your host, Bob Chase, 33rd Degree. Thanks for listening.